Welcome to Whole Team Eats Podcast, a 24/8 media production. Ever wonder who trains your favorite athlete? Join Tim Miller as he takes a look at the behind-the-scenes training of professional and collegiate athletes. Tim connects with trainers, athletes, and others in the sports community to share their stories. This podcast is dedicated to highlighting the work of athletes and trainers to inspire action and build community.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to an all-new episode of Whole Team Eats Podcast. This is Season 1, Episode 9. I'm your host, Tim Miller, and on this show, I sit down with Nick Edmond of EliteU. Nick's path into training wasn't always clear, and there were several tough times along the way. Going all in on training required using all the money he had to buy a plane ticket and several weeks of sleeping in the gym where he was training at. Nick's persistent and dedication to his craft, combined with a great mentor in his partner Rube Oliver, allowed him to develop into the trainer that he is today. On the show, we discuss how Nick's passion for training started when he was an athlete training at the gym that he currently trains at. We dive into what it's been like to be a part of an expanding training business, even if that meant learning how to remodel buildings to cut cost. It's my pleasure to welcome Nick Edmond of EliteU. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you for reaching out.
So, natural start for most of our episodes. If you could just tell our listeners about kind of your background this year and how training has been to start the year.
Yeah, so a little bit about my background. Sports performance background, sports management background. I have a couple coaching certificates as well, athletic coaching certs. This year, it was a little bit different for me. We didn't have any combine guys this year, but I did have a few NFL guys reach out, guys I haven't worked with before. Guys like I had Sam Hubbard this past offseason for about 8 weeks. That was the majority of my spring and early winter a little bit. And then guys like Jalen Davis as well. He plays corner for the Bengals as well. A couple of those guys, and then just NFL prep in general. Just a couple of the off-season guys. Kayvon, we mentioned before. Byron Murphy, those guys. So from anywhere from between, I'm probably going to say January straight on through. I'm going to say just straight to OTAs, honestly. We had those guys. That was our main primary focus this offseason, and then now we're kind of tailoring it back into like high school NCAA. Those guys are getting ready to go off to camp in the next few weeks, so that's kind of where we're at now.
Yeah, and I know it's that point in the year where a lot of these folks and a lot of these athletes that trainers all across the country deal with are now going back. If we're talking about football, they're now going and starting training camp. So I know a lot of those guys are reporting back to camp at this point. So if you could just kind of walk us through your background, who you are, where you grew up, and a little bit about like how sports were an influence in you growing up.
Yeah, man. So I'm from a small town called Blythe, California. It's in Southern California. Population about 8,000. I went to junior college out of high school. I went to Pasadena City College, PCC. Shout out to the Lancers. Spent about a year there. It wasn't the greatest in terms of structure. I don't know if you know much about junior college and how it's structured in California. There's really no dorms, no meal plans, things like that. So things got kind of rocky. Ended up pretty much homeless. Came back home, started working, and my dream was always, even when I was done with football, whatever the case was, I wanted to train. I wanted to help people in some way, whether that was performance training, teaching in some way, whatever the case was. But it worked out in my favor in terms of when I met Rube a couple summers, or summer of 2016. We talked about that a little bit as well. And then it's kind of been there since then. But I would say my biggest motivation for training still is, I did my combine prep here as well at EliteU. Got to my pro day, got to the front of the line, doing my measurements, and scouts like, you can't be here. You're not allowed to be here. So 3 months of training down the drain, money spent, and it was kind of like I came to a crossroad of, trying to keep chasing this dream as a football player or transitioning into training and help people achieve this goal. So as soon as I flew back from that pro day, I came straight and just right into training full time. So I've been here at EliteU for the last 3 to 4 years training full time. Now the GM here and lead trainer, so it's worked out a little bit.
So we're going to touch on EliteU, and I know you briefly mentioned, we talked before the show about your partner, Rube Oliver, who's I believe the owner of the gym.
Yes, sir.
But if you could, just for our listeners, could you expand on why you weren't allowed at the pro day?
Yeah, so there's a couple of unspoken rules about pro days. One is you either have to be from the state or have played high school or college football in that state in order to attend a pro day. So when I was out in upstate Central New York, I reached out to a few colleges like Syracuse, University of Buffalo, Wagner, Colgate. I believe Colgate was in there. And all of them are pretty much like, nah, we're not taking any outsiders, which is fine. So my agent at the time found a school in Texas A&M Commerce that was taking people that were open to come in and do their pro days, and that was it. So I bought the ticket, so off my agent's word, and I was scout recommended by a couple CFL scouts, and as well as I was let in by the athletic director. So I was pretty confident coming to the front of the line, like, hey, like this is gonna be my shot. I'm gonna be able to perform. At least when I'm done with it, you can tell me, hey, you weren't good enough to do it, or at least give me the shot. So I get to the front of the line, and I want to say it was a Cowboys Scout. I'm pretty sure it was a Cowboys Scout. He was just like, what's your name, number, and what school did you go to? So as soon as I mentioned my school, that's when he was like, that's from New York, huh? He's like, yeah, you can't be here. So then I was like, I was shocked. So I honestly stuck around the entire pro day. I waited till everybody was done. I was going to go beg a scout to at least let me run or let me do something. And it didn't work out, but it kind of propelled me to what I'm doing now. So.
Yeah, I'm sure something like that would have like an effect on the motivation to, move from that moment. Obviously, that's a huge setback for you. It's a dream that you've been chasing your entire athletic career. But it seems like, in just hearing your story, talking with you prior to the show, it somewhat propelled you into what you're currently doing today. I do have to say, so you mentioned that it is a Cowboy Scout. Do you hold any grudges against the Cowboys in general?
Man, I did for a little bit, but like last year I had a guy get picked up by them, so I had to like be like, I'm a Cowboys fan for a little bit. So now I'm not as salty about it, but it did take a few years to be like, you know what? So.
I'll tell you what, it's an easy connection because being from right outside Philadelphia as a Philadelphia sports fan, as an Eagles fan, it's a nice, easy bond to talk to somebody about the dislike for the Cowboys. Yeah. So, hopefully on this show, I will have Cowboys trainers or players on the Cowboys, but just it is good to hear that somebody else does have the same dislike for the Cowboys. But moving past that, so you're not allowed at the pro day. You bought your ticket, you're there. It must be a tough feeling in the moment. But then you said from there you've gone into training. So right after your pro day, do you go to Arizona where you currently are?
Yeah. So I believe that if I'm correct, the flight I bought was $450. It was the last $450, like complete last $450 I had, because I was all in on this. So when I came back, I didn't have anything. I had the car that I was borrowing from a family friend. So the gym I'm working in now, I was sleeping in for a little bit, and then just waking up, training, slept, and then I had some friends that ended up helping me out and getting me out, helping me get on my feet. Upgraded to kind of like an extended stay hotel room, and then stayed there for a little bit. But I loved training so much. At the time, it didn't really bother me that I didn't have like a stable place. But now it's kind of like looking in hindsight, I'm like, well, it was some kind of rocky moments, but it worked out.
And so that was, just for timeline's sake, that was what, 4 years ago at this point that you were starting?
Yeah, about then. Because I want to say my pro day was on March 29th. I stayed up. I went to Texas to do this, and I want to say I probably came back like April 3rd, 2nd or 3rd, and like literally that day I came back and transitioned into training.
Gotcha. So you go from your pro day to sleeping in the gym. You don't have stable place to stay at that point, but your love for training is what kept you there. It kept you motivated to continue down this path. Can can you talk about your time training with Rube? That was really originally how it started. Is you were training with Rube, and you said it was some of the best workouts you've ever been through, and it got you in shape. Even though you weren't able to perform at your pro day, it got you pro day ready. Could you talk about the lead up to your pro day and what training with Rube meant to you at that
Yeah, of
time?
course. So, man, my first experience with performance training. So back home in my small town, we didn't have any performance gyms or anything of this nature that we have now, like Kaiser equipment and stuff like that. So my first experience was kind of like just learning on my own, just trial and error. So then my buddy told me to come up and check out Rube for the perform. I didn't know what to expect. And I thought at the time I was a decent athlete. You know, I was still performing on the field, had some decent seasons, but I was missing so much potential. And I learned that when I got here. I was like, my ankles were tight, my hips were tight, everything was out. Like once he showed me, the importance of all these lower limbs that have a play in when you're sprinting and jumping, all those kind of things. Like that's when my performance went, through the roof. I ended up those next two following seasons, I ended up rushing for 1,000 yards each, and I had never done that before in my entire life, and I dedicated, specifically to training. I had never, done any 90-90 external rotations or anything of like specific stuff. It was kind of very general, but when I got into it, like that was like I was like, this is what I need. This is where I need to be. It opened up a lot of potential for me. It even gave me a shot at the NFL. So yeah, that's kind of how it started, and then now it's kind of been like bouncing ideas off each other and making sure that we're on the same page, and it's blossomed into what we have now. So it's worked out.
Yeah, it seems like the private sector of training has really exploded over the last like 10 to 15 years with trainers like you and your partner Rube. You're kind of coming onto the scene and opening these gyms. But for athletes to understand the importance of training, right? Because not everybody, especially where you grew up, has access to this type of training. A lot of high school and collegiate athletes don't have money to pay for that training or don't have access. There's a lot of barriers to entry to get this type of training they need. But it's interesting to hear that from an athlete standpoint, because you've been on both sides of it now, you've been the athlete and the trainer. From an athlete standpoint, you really noticed the difference when training with Rube, right? So like everybody is under the impression if you're going to train, you're going to get better or more in shape. But you were actually saying that you had a noticeable difference and you learned a lot. So you weren't just training, but understanding that you might want to have a future in training, you're kind of trying to soak everything in and learn as much as you can at the same time, which is interesting because you're learning as an athlete at that point.
So I think that's one of the missing concepts in training is not just giving somebody exercises and taking them through a great workout, and yes, they're going to get better, but having them understand why we're doing this and how it's affecting their body and how it's affecting their performance on the field. I think that's one of the most important things. Is a lot of guys can train hard, they do a lot of stuff, but if it's not translating to the field, then we're not doing it right. So in sessions, ask questions why we're doing this. How is this going to translate to the field? And I think that's one of the missing concepts in training in general. It's just helping athletes understand why this is important to them, not just us.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what makes a great trainer nowadays is not only just training them, but educating them to that point. Because it's not, you only can do so much as a trainer. You spend, a disproportionate amount of time training the athlete compared to their playing time on the field or on the court in their respective sport. But it's a joint effort, right? So that athlete has the responsibility to take care of their body or, do stretching and recovery and all those other things that play a key role so that when they show up to your gym, they're ready. Or if they're not able to come to your gym, they can stay prepared with the stuff that they learned while training with you. So that's interesting. If you could, take us back to kind of square one with how EliteU started. Like, where were you guys? It wasn't always the facility that you're in today. So I believe it was when you were an athlete, but let's kind of fast forward. So you're coming into training, but your first workout with Rube, where was it? How was it organized? And really take us through the progression of how it started and where it is today.
So as I mentioned before, we had a Vertimax platform. We had a clear box of like mini bands, a couple of cones. There was some like synergy bands for you to do like high knees and stuff like that. But it wasn't as much as the progression I did that day, but the attention to the detail of what I was doing wrong. Because it's easy to take an athlete through something that they already know how to do. It's in the video, everything's gonna look great, but finding those like small like nuances, like he knew my ankles were tight like 20 minutes into the workout, ankles, hips, all that. He's like, you know what, you have to, when we get to the facility, you have to be there. So just being able to pick and choose things like that, and that comes with years of experience, not having to like sit there and kind of like find intricacies. Like you can see it right off the bat. All right, I know that your hips and your ankles are tight. We need to do this, this, and this, and this. So that was what really got me initially. I'm like, how do you know that? This is my first time ever training with him, and I thought I was a decent athlete, and it turns out I wasn't. So yeah.
So you're outside with the Vertimax, some bands. So now let's talk about you coming into the training side. How did you guys shift from being a small operation outdoors to being in a larger facility that you're in today, training, high school, collegiate, and a lot of professional athletes as well? Can you talk about that progression of, how EliteU evolved
So
over time?
that summer with the outside workout, I went back to school. I came back the following summer. He had just got the keys to the single building that we had. We had maybe bands, a leg press, one Vertimax, and one Kaiser Air Runner, I believe. Maybe we didn't have that yet, but it was like two pieces of equipment with just open space. But I want to say the first couple months were a little rough. Guys started, it's a trickle down effect. Once they start telling people, like, hey, like this is great work, word to mouth. That took us about, I want to say, 2 to 3 years, because it was 14, 17, 18. I would say 4 to 5 years to kind of like fill that space out and to where it was jumping and it was kind of like no room for anything. And by the grace of God, next door there was another business. I believe it was like a interior home decorating design place, but the similar layout of the building we already had. They ended up leaving. We just punched a hole in the wall like probably a month after that. Started filling with like some racks and equipment. Still training, still full-time training, scheduling, helping people while we do most of the work ourselves. We don't hire contractors to come in and fix the equipment or knock down. We punched the hole, figured it out, and then just most recently we have the third building, which used to be a CrossFit gym. During COVID, like when COVID first hit, Arizona was big on every gym was closed down. You couldn't do anything. The only thing that kept us going was essential. We have PT here, which was considered essential business. So that kept us kind of going a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, hey, we're just in here stretching. We're in here doing PT. Like, we're not a gym type. You know what I mean? But ended up, once COVID kind of not subsided, but slowed down and stuff started opening back up. CrossFit didn't end up making it out of the COVID situation, so we ended up punching another hole in the wall. So it's 1, 2, and 3 buildings now that we have turned into from just the park.
So that's where you currently are training now. So it was 3 buildings that were kind of conjoined, but you've now opened up into one space that you call EliteU. Wow, that's quite a progression. And you said that's probably about 5 years or so that it's taken to kind of fill out that gym and redesign it. And obviously, you guys don't hire outside work, so you guys are doing the contracting yourself. You're not just a trainer, but you're actually you model out gyms as well, which is interesting. You're a jack.
But it's just kind of figuring out as it goes along. And just recently, I don't know if we mentioned this yet, but we opened another smaller as a gym as well as an outside turf field inside of a sports complex. So that's our second expand. It's probably about, I would say, 10 minutes away from our original facility. So just starting that too.
And is that just part of the expansion plan, or do you do something different at that facility or with different athletes, or is it just all the same thing?
Yeah, it's all the same thing, 2 different locations, except the biggest thing we're missing at our current facility is just outdoor space, turf space for guys to actually go out and run like 5-10-5, linear speed stuff. That was a tough thing. Is like, and I'm not trying to mention Exos, but Exos down the street, like they've got all that. They've got the open space and they've got the big gym. So our biggest thing was getting the open space so we can get those guys back every off season.
So talking about the guys that you have in your gym and the kind of the clientele that you deal with, every gym when they get started, it always is like a trickle down effect where you have one guy and then they know somebody, or the high school is nearby. But could you talk about the evolution of clientele? I'm assuming it was organic growth, but are you getting guys from the local area, from local high schools? Are you getting professional athletes word of mouth? Like, just talk about your expansion
Yeah,
from a
so
client base
the
point of
I would
view.
say if I can go down the list of names, like guys like Spencer and the Denzel Bergs, and that we're talking about, Keely Ringo as well. Those are all guys that my boss Rube has trained since high school. So it's like surrounding like Saguaro has a lot of they're I mean they have a lot of guys that are getting out, and those guys are I'm probably say 10 out of 11 starters are getting scholarships, and those guys are always coming back. So it kind of helps. You want to make sure we're organic and taking care of people, and in the long run, they know, where home is. Even a guy like Byron, who was born and bred in Arizona, goes to Washington and then gets drafted by Arizona. So that's also, a big deal for us too, is having hometown kids. And the biggest thing for us is not as much. It's not as important training pros, but it's important to us to try to create pros. So having those hometown kids, it's even more of a plus, and they're a bigger even word of mouth for us too as well.
Yeah, I would assume that building an athlete from kind of the foundation up, or the ground up, it has a profound effect not only on the athlete and being able to work with an athlete for that amount of time, but it must do a lot of good things, a lot of positives for your business to say, really, it's not only how much you know about training, and you guys are great trainers, but it's also you have to build up a certain level of trust, because these athletes, a lot of like Shane Rattler, Byron Murphy, Keely Ringo, these are like Denzel Burke. This is like South Carolina, Ohio State, Clemson, the Arizona Cardinals, and there's more to name than that. But their livelihood is what they do every single week on the field. And if they're trusting, the main thing is how do they show up every week? And that's really what you guys do, is you guys prepare them to be the best version of themselves on their court or on the field. And they're putting their faith in you guys and saying, these are the guys who are going to get me ready and keep me prepared for me to perform on the field. So it must mean a lot for you to be able to work for those athletes from a young age to kind of build up that trust. Can you talk about what it's like to
Yeah,
build
man.
trust with some of
I
these
think the most
athletes?
important thing is I try to have most of them understand, especially when they're young, because you use a lot of like as soon as you get to that Division 1 level and you're making plays, there's going to be a ton of people in your ear like, hey, we have this for you, we can do this for you, we can do that for you, but to build a relationship that's tested the time and even the ups and downs of all of their careers, and they still end up coming back and being like, hey, like we love training with you, we thank you for investing in us. I think it's solely due to when they're younger. It's like we're here to work, we're here to invest in you. What do you need from us that we can help you be better? So from that perspective, I think it changes their mind of how like, oh, these guys are just here because of who I am, or what they can get from me, and it happens a lot. So for them to respect that relationship between us, client, and trainer, and still come back every off season and invest in us as well, that it speaks volumes. So
Yeah. So, you've had this expansion of the business, and obviously the trust of the players help expands the business naturally. But, obviously, the stage of the business that you're in, you're kind of early stage career right now, where you're still kind of laying the foundation of your training. You're obviously still learning. You've built up a great foundation of knowledge over the years, training with Rube, being around these players. But, in any industry, people in early stage careers are always learning and wanting to consume more in their respective fields. Can you talk about, what stage of your business you're in? Like, are you trying to expand high school, college kids, professional kids? Like, what's your area of focus, and where are you trying to
yeah,
currently
so
expand your
currently right now
business?
we're in the moment of expanding. So yeah, it's going to be the focus is NCAA, high school, and professional. Doesn't necessarily mean only football. It's football, baseball, basketball. Like we'll have a pretty big baseball season this off season too, with some pros and college guys. So it goes all the way across the board. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is just making sure all those guys are taken care of, and they'll always be back for us, and that's a big thing for us. Not only are they clients, but most of these guys are family to us too as well. So
Absolutely. And can you talk about what your relationship is like with Rube? Like, is he
Yeah.
kind of like he's your mentor, right? But can you talk about like, is he, you obviously went through some tough times, getting kind of started, and it sounds like he's had a huge impact on not only the training side of things, but just from like a personal side of things. He kind of took you under his wing, and when you didn't have a lot, it seemed like he was there for you. He obviously had an impact on you from a training perspective because you said, "This is where I need to be. I've trained with you. This guy's legit. This is where I want to stay." But what has Rube meant to you as a mentor, and how has your relationship with Rube kind of, evolved
Yeah,
over
man, the
time, if you
relationship
will?
is great. The biggest thing for me is I try not to ask for too much and be in people's like, well, I need that, I need that, but the thing he's done great, and I've only ever asked for opportunity, and he's only ever given me opportunity to be great, and he's provided me with the tools and the technology we have around here, to just go out and be myself and help the people, and he's trusted me with the people he's trained for years, guys like Denzel Burke and Spencer and Byron, all those guys. He trusts me to be able to take those guys, and they're still getting great work. So our relationship is it's great. It's back and forth, bouncing ideas off each other. I mean, we wouldn't be here if we weren't able to, sit down and be able to talk things and shoot it, and just being on the same level, in terms of in headspace and training and business ideas. As you know, it's tough to have two guys on the same page, without like ego getting in the way or certain things getting in the way, and it's been working, man. I think we feel like we're just on the cusp of hitting that steamroll and keep opening places and growing and growing and growing. So, man, it's been great, and every opportunity that he's given me, I'm so thankful for. So.
Yeah, just from and where I connect with most trainers, and where we see really an expansion in a way to market your guys' capabilities and what you do with social media, right? So the role that social media plays, inevitably, whether you like it or not, right, it plays a factor in the growth of your business, building your brand as a trainer, building the brand for athletes. Obviously, you have NIL now, so everybody's trying to build their brand and build a reputation at this point. But it's interesting to just watch, from at least from my perspective, as somebody who kind of follows the industry pretty closely, to watch your guys' expansion over time. And it's a natural progression of where we started as 24/8 2 years ago, and just following your guys' journey to where you are now. You've now expanded to basically 3 buildings within one. You have another field with an outdoor space to kind of compete with the Exos of the world, and have these players not only come back, but spread the word and grow your business. So it's interesting to kind of just hear from your side of things how the evolution actually is going. We can watch it all we want, but to hear it from you is pretty interesting. What do you find it hard to motivate players, or are players generally motivated
That's a good
themselves
question.
at that
That's a
collegiate
great question.
professional like level?
I think it's something that every trainer struggles with, and not a lot of trainers want to talk about. But I don't mind. I tell the guys like, hey, if I'm going to tell you how it is, and at the end of the day, if you like it, it is what it is. But I don't want to short you with, what I mean, if you have potential to do more. Um, for the guys that have that internal clock of like go go go, and I need to be doing this, I'm structured, those guys, it's easy, man. Just show up, I got the plan for you, let's get it done. That's easy. The tough ones, there's some tough ones that are like, it's hard to motivate guys that have a lot. You know what I mean? That's just the bottom line. If you have a lot, it's hard to be like, I'm gonna get up in the morning at 6 a.m. and go do this stuff that I really don't want to do. So the biggest thing for me is just showing them the value in the training and how it translates to them being on the fields, which translates to them making more money. So finding a little bit of external motivation, but I try not to rely on it, because some guys, you know what I mean? It's like, I gotta have a certain song or a certain list for me to be in a good mood to get a good lift, and that's a dangerous place to be. You always want to be, motivated internally, but a little bit of external motivation, helps them understand that, what, this training can take me far beyond just, being a decent athlete at what I'm doing. I can go change my family's life by earning a contract or earning a scholarship, and my parents don't have to pay for school anymore, like things like that. So a little bit of external motivation, and And I just try not to take any BS, honestly. I try to let them know from the beginning, like, this is what it's going to be, and let's go from there. Some people like it, some people don't, and it's, I mean, it's worked so far. So
Yeah, money is always a great motivator, whether it's a scholarship to help out your family, not have to pay for school, or now we have NIL to actually give money to your family. But once you get professional, it's the first contract, and then it's really make it to that second contract. But I could understand how it would get difficult with people who, might lose some of that motivation as they progress. Not all of them, probably not most of them, but there's always going to be some who struggle with that. So it's interesting to hear how you deal with that. And I know it's different for every athlete or every trainer how they motivate it, but you have to think, right? If you're doing a good job educating players on why this is important, why training is so crucial, you would think that would help
yeah,
self-motivate them in some way. Or if there's some type of perceived value in the time and effort of what you're doing as it translates to them, if it translates onto the field, they should have no issue staying motivated. So that's interesting. So we're going to start to wrap up here. I just have a few last questions, and then we can wrap up in a second. But future plans. So you've come to this point. You have the facilities, you have the athletes, you've learned a lot. You seem like you're well on your way to a very rewarding training career at this point. But where do you guys plan to go from here? Like, what's the next 3 to
it's
5
still the
years look
same.
like for
Expansion. So
EliteU?
I told you about the expansion that's not too far from the facility now. But the plan is to have a field and a gym in every area in the valley. So West Valley, East Valley, all through Arizona, and hopefully expand into California. Um, I don't know about franchising yet. I don't think we'll do that route, but I think for now we're thinking of East Valley, West Valley, putting in EliteU on those places that guys it's tough for them to travel out to, because we're in Scottsdale right now, and like some of the guys that are deeper in the state really can't make it 30, 40 minutes out. So we would like to have a facility out somewhere where they can just get into, so they're not like either not doing anything or going somewhere else. So that's the plan now for now. So.
And I'm assuming that those expansion plans would also come with expanding your training base, right? Like
Yes,
more
sir.
trainers would have to come in and be hired, and I guess are you guys already starting to? I'm sure you guys are starting to think about that, but how is it? Just thinking about bringing in other trainers, is that something that you guys find exciting? Is it kind of a scary thought to bring in other
Yeah,
trainers to work
I
with
mean,
the
it is a little
athletes?
bit because you always want to make sure that the athletes are in good hands in terms of making sure they're doing the right things, being safe first and foremost, keeping them injury free. That's the first and foremost. But we've just went on a little hiring spree recently. We've got 2 or 3 new trainers, so especially with the new expansion, very qualified trainers, and that's ease of mind. It makes us we can leave guys there with certain people and then don't have to worry about it. It happens in training, but yeah. The process it's a little bit tough because I think me and Rube are more like grind mode, like however many hours it takes, we'll be here. Go, 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 go. And for some people, that's not the case. Some people just really want just to train, which that's great. But finding people with like-minded mindset and same vision, same goals, I think that's the toughest thing to find. But we found some good trainers. So we're at that moment now where we've got the expansion, we've got the trainers, and I think within the next 2 or 3 years, we'll probably look to expand again and hire more. So.
That's awesome. One last question for you. Uh, so you've made it this far, right? You've gone through all the struggles that you started out with from the athlete perspective, and then cracking into the training training side of things. You were sleeping in the gym, training kind of just around the clock, EliteU 24/7. But what advice would you give to yourself at the start of your journey that you weren't aware of, if at all? Some people wouldn't change a thing, but would you change anything at all, or did you feel you need to learn those different things to get to where you are today? But if there's anything, what
If I
advice
were to
would you
go
give
back,
yourself?
the only reason I say I wouldn't change a thing is because those trials and tribulations brought me here, and it's kind of calloused me to be able to do some of the things I'm doing now. Um, but if I had to give any advice, I would say when you're in that grind mode of those first 2-3 years where you're kind of like, damn, I don't have a lot of clients or whatever the case may be, remember, take care of yourself so you can take care of others. Don't get so caught up in the work going, and you wake up and you're, you're, tired and burnt out and all that kind of stuff, and now you're giving half sessions to clients. Just take care of yourself so you can take care of others. That would be my main thing.
I think that's a great piece of advice for anybody, not just trainers, right? But once again, Nick, Edmond, we appreciate your time. We're going to be following you from here. We're excited to see where your story goes and EliteU as a whole goes from here. So once again, Nick, Edmond, thanks for joining us on Whole Team Meets podcast.
Man, thank you so much
we're very honored to have you on.